Cape Town's so cool, man. This is one thing, I've been here a couple of times, but I still have not gotten used to the car guards. I've not gotten used to that. These are the scariest human beings I've ever seen in my life. Petrifying. Petrifying. I still remember the first encounter I had with a car guard. I'm with my wife. My wife's parking the car, and she goes, oh, just, look behind you, make sure there's no one there. I look behind, I was like, ah! She was like, what is that? I'm like, it's a zombie, they're real! She goes, no, it's a car guard, it's a car guard. I'm like, car guard? He had one eye and no teeth. I mean, what is really happening? She says, he's a car guard. I'm like, what is a car guard? He guards the car. I'm like, he guards the car? Who's gonna guard me from him? I don't know who's gonna understand. I'm scared right now, I'm scared.
What's up, Ish?
What's up, how are you?
Ismael Maldonado.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so I met you, I think we met in June.
In June, yes, at the show, which hotel? The Ace Hotel.
Bird Comedy Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as soon as I met you, I was introduced to you by, Akasha introduced us. I did some research on you. I think out of every comic that I've met, you definitely have one of the most interesting stories that I've come across. Even when I went to your shows, I noticed that you bring your life into the jokes. You're Dominican.
Mm-hmm. And Puerto Rican.
And Puerto Rican.
That's two parades.
Okay.
That's two parades, okay?
Okay. You're Catholic.
Yes.
You grew up in a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood.
Yes. And
tell us everybody where your wife is from.
My wife is South African, and she's Muslim. That's right, people. Yeah. I got all three.
Yeah,
I got all three.
Very confusing life. Yeah.
It gets even more confusing, but
how do you bring all these experiences? I think it's great, actually. How do you bring that onto stage, and turn that into humor?
Well, I guess I'll start in the beginning when, doing comedy, I was telling jokes, which is what stand-up is, what most people, when they go to a stand-up comedy show, they're saying, oh, I'm gonna see someone tell jokes.
Yeah.
And I was telling jokes, and I was good at it. I knew how to write punchlines. I knew that I was likable, so I can get people on my side on stage. And I was getting opportunities, but I wasn't going where I wanted to go because I wasn't separating myself from my peers. I was just another comedian that had jokes here and there about oddball stuff. Maybe once or twice I will talk about who I am. And I just came to, I went to South Africa to perform comedy for the first time.
Yeah, South Africa,
and which is an amazing comedy scene that's there. And my wife used to work in radio before she took up her new calling in life, which is she's a life coach.
Yeah.
So she was able to get me on a show. And performing in South Africa, they wouldn't understand American references or even specific New York references or even things about Puerto Rican and Dominican. They don't understand what that is.
So how'd you relate?
I had to really just take all the material that I had at that time that's about myself, that's easily relatable, and do that. And I had one of the best performances I've ever had. And when I came back to New York, I realized that I needed to stop telling jokes and I needed to talk about myself and inject comedy into that. Yeah. And how I was going to separate myself from my peers is connecting with the audience.
Yeah.
I can connect with them and they're on my side and I'm talking about just life. They're going to be things that either one, they're going to relate to, or two, they're going to find interesting.
Okay.
And then I started looking at my life and thinking, okay, I grew up in an Orthodox Hasidic Jewish neighborhood, was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, and then my wife is Muslim and her family's a practicing Muslim family.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the time that we live in now, the three religions are kind of bickering with each other. So, and a lot of comedians also kind of sometimes, will dig at religion when I come from a very playful angle. It's just funny stories about where I grew up, my family, and her family.
You ever troll?
And I'm sorry?
You ever troll your family?
No.
Your in-laws?
Sometimes,
Even
yeah,
your
yeah.
family, your immediate family, you ever troll them?
Sometimes, yeah.
How does that go?
I mean, it comes, it's just fall from a playful side. So yeah, they love it. They love it.
Damn,
Yeah.
Your family reunions must be lit.
It's kind of crazy. And
Shit.
I knew that was something powerful there. And she was even telling me, she was like, I don't know a lot of people who have those aspects in their life, like all three of them, where you can actually bring people together with laughter.
Yeah.
And then I kept thinking more about myself, and I'm Hispanic, but Ismael is not the most common Hispanic name.
Nah, not at all, bro.
Not like
Nah.
Jose or Hector, like
Yeah.
that's where you got to go, Raul, that's what you want, Ishmael.
So
like,
why
what?
is your name Ishmael?
So my dad's best friend I was supposed to be named Robert. Imagine me, Roberto. I don't know.
Yeah,
Ishmael.
you look like a Robert.
I look like a Robert?
A little bit. Yeah.
The day before I was born, my dad's best friend, he was Puerto Rican, named Ishmael, passed away. He died.
Okay.
So my mom named me after him. But the reason why Ishmael, I mean, there are Hispanic people who have the name. It's a really small amount, but it's like anything. You meet people named like Rakim or like Eli or I mean Miriam, which is Arabic for Mary. I know some Hispanic women name that. It's just like anything, like where Spain is and where all the Muslim countries are. At one point, Islam was in Spain. So like anything, cultures mix.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a foundation of that culture that's there. So that's why I have that name, even though the origin of it is Hebrew or Arabic.
Okay.
So it threw me off. So I mean, I never felt close to being Hispanic. I never felt Puerto Rican, Dominican. My family would kind of like, they would troll me all, and kind of alienate me. So then I started speaking about that. I felt like a lot of people could understand being first generation in America, where America is being a melting pot. Like, your family can be from Pakistan, or your family's from Japan, or my family from Hispanic countries, but if you're first generation and you didn't grow up around them, you don't even understand that culture. You become American.
Yeah.
And then I never thought I would marry a woman from South Africa. So it's kind of all those things that I said slowly. Let me start putting into my comedy. I was scared at first because I knew that I was gonna be vulnerable, and I knew that I had an act that worked. That if I was gonna start changing my jokes in that transition, you're gonna have hard times. And there were a couple of like 6 months where I was like bombing on stage, like I wasn't, and then like people weren't booking me.
While you were you were in Cape Town, right?
In Cape Town.
While you were in Cape Town, did you ever, even though they responded to you well, did you ever feel like there were certain things that like you might offend people with, or certain jokes you told that people didn't like? You ever feel that way with your family?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in South Africa, like apartheid is still very fresh. It only ended, in 1994. And there were a lot of atrocities that happened. Yeah. So when it comes to like sexual humor, which I'm not really a comedian that talks about sexual humor, like I don't have sex jokes, but I have a couple of jokes where it's like misdirection, talking about sex, but the concept is I don't know that I am. They don't like that there. So like, I had to definitely, before I did my first big show, I worked like small rooms to kind of figure it out. And I was able to understand, this won't fly there, this will. And I think the best thing was I really wrote humor that was local, like local references, local jokes coming from my perspective from America. Yeah. And I would say that I'm married to a Cape Townian. Would relax the audience and allow me to bring them in, because I was on a show where there was another American on there, and he just went into doing jokes, and he was just kind of like making fun of like, oh, it's so ridiculous, the dollar here is so strong. I mean, I could buy a steak for like 70 cents. And the audience didn't laugh, like they got offended by that. They were like, what are you trying to say? Like, you're coming with your American dollar. So
Americans,
like, and it played up to the stereotype, arrogant American. So I knew, that was one of the best lessons that I learned, that you got to bring the audience in, especially if it's out of your comfort zone, so they can relax. Yeah.
So I always wonder, like, as a comedian, when you go to other places out of your comfort zone, how scary is it, or how much work do you have to put in to relate to the audience? or to get them to understand what you're trying to say on stage?
It's a lot, and you have to break any kind of preconceived notions. Like again, like American comedian, people just in their head have kind of like a stereotype about that, and I gotta break through that, you know. And my whole thing is I gotta come off as likable as possible so people can relax. And yeah, and I just gotta know my bearings. I gotta know what to say, what not to say. Also, like, you know, I'm not gonna go into what the political or what like the racial climate there is, because I'm just a visitor there. They would be like, who are you to be talking about this? Yeah, I know maybe you're married to someone from South Africa, but like keep your opinions to yourself. So I really just stick to what I know, which is kind of just like silly, goofy comedy about myself. It really, I mean, I would love more and more as I keep going there to have a voice about it, because you know, my comedy is, because it becomes part of who I am, because that's my wife. But you definitely always gotta know where you're at and know what you can do, what you can't do. Listen, even just traveling in the U.S., you go to the Midwest where it's more conservative, and or down south where I've done shows before, and I know like I'm gonna have to push back a little bit. I gotta be a little bit more conservative. If I do religious humor, like, you know, they may get offended at something really silly and simple, and it's just that's their culture, and I need to understand that. Comedians, I mean, I'm all about like free speech and all that when it comes to comedy, but like, you know, not everything is funny. And I don't think just because you write something well, but it's a really offensive topic, that if you do say it and people get upset, that a comedian is supposed to be like, oh, that's fucking ridiculous, it's comedy. I don't agree with that. I agree with, you need to understand audiences are different, comedy is subjective. If you're around your fan base, like if you are blessed enough to have that, then do whatever you want. But when you are going into comedy clubs, you're not that known yet. You're building your image and your fan base. You know, you need to know, like, I need to kind of, you know, not go too far off the edge. And if there is a bad reaction, then I need to accept that. If you can be really edgy and people love it, then that's fine.
Do you have a favorite city you like to go to? Performing, I mean?
I'm trying to think. I like Boston a lot.
Yeah.
I've done comedy there a couple of times. That's a really rich comedy city. A lot of great comedians that come from there, like, they understand comedy.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
they're probably like very relaxed environment, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really cool place. But I mean, you really can't compete with New York. I think
Okay.
New York is really amazing in the sense that there's so many different comedy venues, and in that it draws so many different audiences. Like the audience at Bird Brain, which I hope to perform at soon, they were like a young audience who they understand comedy. Like they were smart comedy, they're probably comedy fans, which is fantastic. And you find that a lot in New York.
I was actually at the Bird Brain show on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was pretty,
how was it?
It was pretty dope, man.
They run a good show there.
Definitely. I think that was like the third one or fourth one they've had. It's always a good lineup. I definitely enjoy every comic that I've seen so far over there.
Nice.
Yeah. I learned from a comic I spoke to a few months ago. He told me that all the best comics it's taken them 10 years to get to where they want to be at, and sometimes, you know what I'm saying, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it may take longer. I'm not sure how long you've done comedy, but
For 8 years.
8 years. Do you ever feel like you get to a point where it's like you're just fucking frustrated, like things aren't going your way, and when you do reach that, like, what do you do to fix that?
Absolutely. I mean, there have been times where I've just said, like, what the fuck am I doing? Really?
Yeah.
Like, am I wasting time doing this? So I go, should I go develop an app? I mean, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but you got to just push forward. And I think a lot of times people say this because it takes 10 years for a comic to get their comedy voice, which I feel like I got now. I just got recently, like a year ago. So it took me 7 years to get my comedy voice. And now I hope it doesn't take another 2 more years for me to master it. I mean, you came to see me do a half an hour, which I can easily do 45, and I already know what makes me funny and how I'm able to connect with people. But that's what it does. And I mean, people say that because, you know, there wasn't things like YouTube or like MTV, which MTV Music Television, it's all basically just shows now. There weren't outlets like this 10 years ago that gave comedians such a platform, where a lot of comedians now launch their careers really quickly. It was like limited amount of opportunities, and you had to go on like late night. If you were able to get on Letterman or The Tonight Show, for 5 minutes, you got a big audience that saw you. But now you see comedians doing really well. They don't have to do that. Things like podcasts came out, which are perfect for comedians.
Yeah, that's popping right now.
So that's something else. I just think that even the 10-year mark is, I think you just know yourself really well. Because I've seen some comedians after just 4 years and they're rising up, but you can see like they're still rough in the edges. Like I would like to see what they look like in another 4 years. So that 10-year mark, I think, is still the golden rule, but now you can get exposure quicker. Even something like this, I'm excited to be on. I think now you can average that probably down to maybe like 7 or 8, but it still takes years. It's really amazing. It still takes years.
So when you were coming up, was there anybody that you had mentoring you? Like, who did you look up to?
I looked up to, it was interesting. Growing up, I looked up to Seinfeld and Chris Rock, which two completely different styles of comedy, but they both spoke to me. What I loved about Seinfeld is it was like just everyday humor. It was really witty. It was really smart. It was so smart, yet it wasn't smart enough that it would go over your head. It was about relatable stuff, and that he was clean. I really liked that he didn't have to curse. And then what I liked about Chris Rock is Chris Rock was the first comic I saw just speak about himself in a raw sense. Like he spoke about dating. He spoke about the racism and the bullshit about that. He spoke about the black community and spoke about issues that were there, which made me want to speak about the Hispanic community and like issues that are there. And I really gravitated to how real it was. So those are two people that I looked up to, and I was very happy to find out that in real life they're best friends, which I didn't know at that point. But that really helped me. Like I'm like, oh, these two people that I look up to, they made a connection together. So I feel like that energy that's there is great energy that I'm trying to tap into. But at first, when I started, I didn't have mentorship, and I think I got lost for a while. I think mentorship in the arts is really, really important. Someone who mentored me for a little while, his name is Angelo Lizardo. You guys got to check him out. He is doing really well for himself. He's the warm-up comic for The Daily Show, and he's also Trevor Noah's opening act when Trevor Noah tours around America. Yeah. So like he had me under his wing, and he took me to. I started doing the urban comedy show circuits with like black and Hispanic rooms, which they're tough. They're tough.
Really?
Yeah. They're you got to make them laugh in like a minute or two, or they're gonna fucking tell you boo.
That's funny.
So it made you learn how to be funny quick.
Yeah.
The only thing about that was they don't allow you to do setups. So like if you go into an audience like an urban comedy show, like if you're going to talk about something about like, they already know what you're going to talk about. So if you do an audience that's foreign, an audience that doesn't understand where you're coming from, and there's no setup, then they don't understand. So that's why like performing at those shows hindered me from performing at comedy clubs, because at comedy clubs where they drew a big audience of people all over, they didn't, like I didn't have setups. So they didn't understand. When I got to the punchline, some people were laughing, some people weren't, and they were like, what's going on? I think it's a balance of the two. But the comedy clubs are mainstream. I think every comic eventually, you want to kind of figure out what that mainstream audience is, but you don't have to sell out also. You can still keep your voice. Yeah. But he was a mentor. I actually had a friend who mentored me. His name is Rory Albanese. Okay. He was the executive producer and writer of The Daily Show, and most recently of The Nightly Show.
All right, nice.
So I've had some good people around me giving me advice and pushing me through the path.
Yeah. So what you got working on? What you working on right now?
Right now, I'm continuing to expand my set. I started, like at this point, like I don't really write too much new material. It was like the main topics that I got, I just keep expanding them. I've been getting a lot of auditions, which has been exciting for like web series and commercials and stuff, which has been great. Nice. And that's going to be exciting because it's going to promote my brand, who I am. Yeah. And then I'm just working on trying to get on some college shows and really just work more on this little like TV project that I have and have it ready to be able to hopefully present it to someone.
Yeah.
And that's my main focus. And I really believe that I got something special coming up.
All right.
Yeah.
Ismael Maldonado. Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Peace.